You're listening to Nocturnal Nightmares. While the world sleeps peacefully, we open the door to what lies beneath. The stories that surface in silence, the fears that rise in the dark. These are not dreams, they are reminders. Stay with us. And don't close your eyes just yet. The first echo, a disembodied murmur filtering through the skeletal remains of Blackwood Sanatorium, slammed into me not a sound, but a certainty. I had trespassed into a place far worse than forgotten. What began as a pilgrimage for Elias, chronicler of decay, devolved instantly into a shivering dread that would stitch itself into the fabric of my remaining days. For years, the siren song of dereliction had pulled me, camera in hand, into the husks of abandoned structures, seeking the stark poetry in rust and ruin. I'd navigated countless forsaken halls, but none whispered warnings like Blackwood. Blackwood Sanatorium. Decades shuttered, a sprawling behemoth, gnawed raw by time on the city's frayed edge. It was the Everest for trespassers like me. 5 tiers of collapsing corridors, spectral operating theaters, and shadowed recesses pregnant with untold histories. Months I'd plotted this descent, awaiting the cloak of a new moon. Breaching its perimeter felt anticlimactic, almost insulting. A warped plank beside a ground floor window yielded with a groan, and I slipped into the thick, cloying atmosphere. Dust motes danced like static in my flashlight's cone, illuminating wall shedding paint like sunburnt skin, and the ghostly silhouettes of discarded medical apparatus. That initial hour unfolded as consecrated time. My lens captured the spectral nursery, its view in pain miraculously intact. Vacant cribs standing sentinel in the gloom. Administrative offices surrendered their secrets in drifts of brittle paper. Patient histories dissolving under the gentlest pressure. Down in the cavernous cafeteria, metal trays lay stacked in silent anticipation of phantom meals. It was the sublime decay I craved. Then, on the 3rd floor, amidst the unsettling quiet of what must have been the psychiatric wing, it found me. A voice, faint, undeniably human, drifting from the upper strata of the building. My breath hitched, my pulse hammered against my ribs. Wind, I insisted silently. Just the architecture settling. But a second voice joined the first. Masculine, feminine, entwined in the unmistakable cadence of dispute. Too distant for clarity, yet the anger, the friction, was palpable. Every fiber screamed retreat. Flee, find the car, erase this night. Yet, the gravitational pull of the unknown proved stronger. Perhaps other explorers, I rationalized, or vagrants seeking refuge in the higher reaches. Regardless, the mystery demanded witness. I ascended the protesting staircase, each footfall swallowed by the vast silence, the creak of ancient timber amplifying my intrusion. The voices swelled as I crested the 4th floor, emanating from behind imposing double doors labeled Operating Theater. Ear pressed to the cold wood, the words finally coalesced. Can't sustain this, Marcus. A woman's voice rasped, tight with tension. Discovery is inevitable. Easy, the man countered, his tone steeped in casual arrogance. This shell served us for months. Nobody ventures here. But the risk, if someone... We handle it, he sliced through her fear, as we always do. Ice water sluiced down my spine. These were no mere trespassers, no kindred spirits of ruin. This was something else, something dangerous. Extraction, immediate and silent, became imperative. I pivoted, but my hurried movement betrayed me. A metal basin, perched precariously on a nearby gurney, met the concrete floor with a shattering clang that reverberated through the dead hospital like a gunshot. Silence crashed down from behind the doors. Then, rapid footfalls. Sheer animal panic seized me. I bolted, abandoning stealth, sprinting down the corridor. Behind me, the heavy theater door slammed open. "You, hold it." My legs churned, fueled by primal terror. Down the stairwell, 2 steps at a time, the echo of their pursuit gaining. Rounding a landing on the 2nd floor, fingers snagged my jacket's collar. I wrenched violently, felt the fabric tear as I broke free. I burst through the same splintered window frame I'd entered, tumbling onto the overgrown, dew-slicked grounds. My car, secreted a block distant beneath concealing trees, felt an eternity away. I reached it, keys rattling in my trembling hand, distant shouts sharp against the night air. As I tore away from the curb, my rear-view mirror captured 2 figures spilling from the sanatorium's maw. Even across the distance, a metallic glint flashed in the man's grasp. Unmistakably, a firearm. I drove without direction, hours bleeding into one another. Sheer terror, my co-pilot. Every pair of headlights blooming behind me was a potential threat, tightening the knot in my chest. Only the grey wash of dawn permitted me to pull onto the shoulder of a deserted highway, the engine ticking cool, my hands vibrating against the still wheel. What hornet's nest had I kicked? Narcotics? Illicit trade? Whatever clandestine enterprise thrived in Blackwood's rot, I was catastrophically submerged. The police? The thought surfaced, then submerged again under waves of apprehension. I was trespassing, I'd confess, in a condemned building, and I overheard something. And Marcus's chilling confidence served us for months, hinted at impunity, perhaps even connections. Prudence dictated disappearance. I feigned illness to my employer, barricaded myself within my apartment, trying to weave a fragile narrative of anonymity. They hadn't seen my face clearly, hadn't clocked my vehicle. But the shadows began to creep into my sanctuary. Subtle dislocations marked my return home each day. A book repositioned, a drawer slightly ajar. My laptop's activity log showed access times when I'd been absent. Twice, venturing out for necessities, the same nondescript sedan materialized in my periphery, a silent, persistent echo of the sanatorium's pursuit. Paranoia became my constant companion, a corrosive, acid-dissolving sleep, amplifying every creak and groan of the building. My phone went unanswered, emails unread. Friends' concerned messages piled up. But how could I articulate this invisible siege? A week fractured by fear culminated in finding my apartment door unlatched, swinging inward at my touch. Inside, chaos, drawers disgorged, furniture brutalized. Yet strangely, nothing appeared stolen, only violated. And on the kitchen table, stark against the wood grain, lay a single sheet of paper, Neat block lettering delivered a verdict that froze my blood. We know you. We know where you sleep. Silence is your only sanctuary. Next time, we won't be so discreet. That was the fracture point. A duffel bag hastily packed, my bank account drained, the open road my only refuge. I drove until the landscape blurred into an unrecognizable tapestry. Sleeping fitfully in the car's confines, cash my only currency. My digital footprint, phone, cards, meticulously erased. 3 months have bled away since that night bled into my life. I inhabit a small town now. Geographically and spiritually, adrift by thousands of miles, washing dishes under an assumed name. Dyed hair, a beard. Futile attempts to obscure the man who blundered into Blackwood. Safety remains an illusion. Each diner patron entering the bell's jingle. Every car idling too long at the curb could be them. Nightmares routinely drag me back to those echoing corridors. The tear in fabric, the glint of steel. Flight cannot be indefinite. Eventually, the reckoning must come. The FBI, perhaps. A full confession laid bare. But for now, survival hinges on perpetual motion, on the constant weary surveillance of my own back. My romance with ruin is dead. The thrill of forgotten spaces tastes like ash, poisoned by the knowledge of the tangible dangers concealed within those silent walls. Some truths I've learned with brutal finality carry a lethal weight. Some thresholds are better left uncrossed. As I commit these words to paper in this transient room, the swiftness of life's derailment astounds me. One flicker of curiosity, one step into the forbidden, and the entire architecture of existence can collapse. Let this chronicle serve as a stark beacon to any soul tempted by the allure of abandonment. The darkness harbors more than dust and memories. Sometimes, the most terrifying specters aren't echoes of the past, but flesh and blood entities guarding present-day secrets with lethal resolve. So, should you ever find yourself before that breached fence, that invitingly unsecured door, remember Elias. Remember the price of unearthing what lies buried in the shadows. Remember that the true hauntings are often terrifyingly real. Who could have foreseen that securing a cavernous space for mere overflow, a pragmatic solution for construction supplies, and weekend tinkering away from domestic tranquility would unravel into the most profoundly unsettling chapter of my existence? By day, it was precisely what I'd sought, an expanse of concrete and steel, utilitarian shelves climbing toward unseen rafters, a place defined by emptiness and potential, but nightfall painted it in entirely different hues. The lease, inked perhaps 3 months prior, felt straightforward. The owner, a man whose demeanor suggested only blunt honesty, vouched for the structure's integrity, citing a history untroubled by prior occupants. The rent was equitable, the location convenient, a mere quarter-hour drive from home. My initial survey revealed the expected, a formidable rolling metal shutter guarding the main entrance, secured by a heavy padlock. Beyond it stretched a central corridor, a spine from which branched rows upon rows of towering steel shelving units, 7 feet tall at least, regimented into parallel lines that created narrow, shadowed canyons between them. I recall the Saturday morning I first colonized the space. My pickup, laden with the sinews of my trade, sacks of cement, cartons brimming with nails, formidable power tools, coiled extension cords, lengths of raw lumber, backed up to the entrance. Unlocking the echoing emptiness, I began the rhythmic labor of hauling and stacking. The overhead fluorescent tubes ignited with a resonant hum when I threw the switch near the door, bathing the interior in a cool, almost clinical light. It was functional, stark, just a vast concrete shell punctuated by metal racks. In one corner, I designated my workshop, arranging tools, stacking scrap wood onto a lower shelf, and positioning the hefty cement bags near the entrance for convenience. My plan was simple. Return the following day to commence crafting a small bench. A couple of hours passed in familiar tasks. Drilling test holes, assessing load-bearing points, checking the airflow. Locking up that afternoon, nothing felt amiss. The place breathed normalcy. The first tremor of the peculiar arrived about a week later. Dinner concluded, I remembered a forgotten box of nails still residing in the truck bed. Rather than ferry it home, the warehouse seemed the logical stop. It was past 8, the sun long surrendered. Arriving at the darkened structure, I disengaged the lock and stepped into the familiar cool. The light switch, conveniently located, yielded instantly. And just as instantly, from somewhere deep within the shelved labyrinth, came a faint, distinct clink. A brief metallic punctuation, like a stray coin dropped onto steel. I froze, straining my ears against the sudden silence that followed. Nothing, perhaps thermal contraction, I reasoned. The building settling its metal bones. Or maybe an item shifting precariously on a high shelf. I dismissed it. I navigated to my designated nail storage, deposited the new box, and performed a cursory check of my equipment. All seemed undisturbed. Yet, as I turned to depart, a soft squeak whispered through the space. I pivoted, scanning for a loose hinge, a leaning pipe. Again, only profound stillness. A shrug, a turn of the key, and I drove away. The subsequent weekend found me eager to begin my bench project. I arrived mid-morning, around 10. The day unfolded in a satisfying rhythm of measuring, sawing, and sanding. Dust motes danced in the shafts of light, filtering through unseen gaps high above. I worked until 6, pleased with my progress, enveloped entirely by the mundane reality of creation. No odd sounds, no prickling sensations. A perfectly ordinary session. That same evening, however, around 9, the realization struck. A costly power tool lay exposed on my makeshift workbench, not secured in its cabinet, as prudence dictated. A quick trip back was necessary. The parking area lay submerged in near darkness, save for the lonely vigil of a single street lamp at the corner. The air possessed an unseasonal chill. Parking. I retrieved my flashlight from the glove compartment before letting myself in. I flipped the light switch. The fluorescent tubes flickered fitfully before stabilizing. And then I heard it again. A metallic scraping emanating from the deeper recesses between the shelf rows. It sounded unnervingly, like a chain being dragged, slowly, intermittently, across the bare concrete. A few seconds of the grating sound, then silence. My pulse leaped. I held my breath, listening intently. The sound ceased. Building settling, I told myself, forcing calm. Something shifting. I made my way to the tool cabinet, unlocked it, secured the drill inside, and latched it firmly, deliberately pushing the sound from my mind. But as I retraced my steps toward the exit, it returned, undeniably louder this time. I stopped dead. The scraping originated distinctly from the vicinity of the third row of shelves. My flashlight beam sliced through the gloom in that direction, illuminating only the impassive metal frames under the cold fluorescent glare. No discernible movement, no fleeting shadows. Yet the sound persisted, sharp and clear, the unmistakable drag of metal on concrete. A knot tightened in my gut. My mouth went instantly dry. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the vastness. "Anyone there?" Silence answered. Rationality warred with rising panic. I forced myself to walk slowly down the third aisle, flashlight beam probing every shelf, every corner. Nothing seemed disturbed. The shelves stood monolithic, no loose parts apparent. I scanned the floor. No stray metal rods, no discarded chains. After several minutes of fruitless searching, the sound had vanished completely. I exited quickly, fumbling slightly with the lock, and drove home, a profound unease settling over me, the memory of that grating noise replaying relentlessly. A few days later, needing assistance with a fresh delivery of cement bags, I enlisted my friend, Leo. The task required an evening run, post-work. Leo met me at my house around 7, and we drove over together. I recounted the strange occurrences, the noises in the empty warehouse. He chuckled, dismissing it easily. A loose gate, somewhere nearby perhaps, or a metal bracket vibrating in the wind. His skepticism made me feel slightly foolish, yet his presence was undeniably comforting. We arrived, unlocked the heavy door, and activated the lights. The familiar scene greeted us. Shelves in orderly rows, a clean floor, the usual cool, still air. We hefted the first 2 heavy bags inside. As we maneuvered the second into place, the sound returned. That distinct, grating scrape. It was loud enough, clear enough, that we both stopped simultaneously, mid-motion. Leo looked at me, his earlier amusement gone. "That's metal, all right," he conceded. "You sure there isn't a side door rattling loose?" I gestured towards the solid walls. "Just the main entrance. Everything else is sealed tight." We set the bags down. Leo drew his phone, activating its flashlight. We moved cautiously toward the far aisle, the supposed origin of the noise. Our footsteps echoed unnervingly in the quiet. A palpable tension hung in the air. My palms grew damp. My heart hammered against my ribs, as if anticipating a sudden confrontation. Reaching the suspected spot, we were met with absolute silence. Leo swept his light across the floor, up the shelves, along the walls. Nothing, not a thing out of place. We stood there for a long minute, listening intently. No scraping, no clinking, no squeaks. We experimentally tapped shelves, kicked lightly at the concrete floor. Nothing replicated the sound. Leo glanced at me, perplexed. "Quiet now. Maybe a loose fixture overhead?" We craned our necks, examining the lights high above. They appeared stable, secure. The warehouse remained utterly silent. Defeated, we turned back towards the entrance. The moment we neared the main door, the scraping resumed. This time it felt more deliberate, insistent. A slow drag. Pause. Another drag. Leo and I exchanged a wide-eyed look. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. "This isn't normal," he muttered, his voice low. The knot in my stomach tightened painfully. We both spun around, facing the interior again. Instantly, the sound ceased. We waited uncertain, suspended between investigation and flight. A primal urge to escape surged through me. My breathing felt shallow, my hands cold. "Let's just check one more time," Leo proposed, though his tone lacked conviction. We advanced back down the corridor. Again, silence descended like a shroud. No movement, no metallic complaint. The shelf stood impassive, solid. I nudged one with my boot. It was immovable. Leo and I looked at each other, frustration mingling with a growing dread. We turned to leave once more. And as soon as our backs were turned, heading definitively for the exit, the sound erupted again. Loud, persistent, echoing through the aisles like someone methodically dragging a heavy chain link by link across the floor. We both jolted to a halt. Leo swore under his breath. Adrenaline shot through me, tensing every muscle. I scanned wildly, trying to pinpoint the source, but it seemed to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. That was the tipping point. "Let's get out of here," I said, the words escaping raggedly. Leo needed no persuasion. We practically sprinted to the truck. I secured the warehouse lock with trembling hands, nearly dropping the key. Inside the cab, we sat for a moment in stunned silence, catching our breath. Leo shook his head slowly. "I don't know what the hell that is, Elias," he finally said, "but I'm not setting foot back in there after dark." I nodded mutely, my mind scrambled for explanations. Resonant pipes, structural groans, animals. But none adequately explained the sound's metallic nature, its specific location, or, most disturbingly, its apparent reaction to our presence, our movements, our intent to leave. That calculated quality unsettled me more than anything. In the subsequent days, I returned only under the full glare of the sun to monitor my equipment. Everything remained untouched, undisturbed. The noises never manifested during daylight hours. Shelves stood firm, materials lay precisely as I'd left them. No evidence of intrusion, locks inviolate. I even conducted a thorough inspection of the walls, searching for hidden vents, conduits, anything that might generate nocturnal acoustics. I found nothing. My conversation with the owner yielded little. He feigned surprise, claimed ignorance of any such phenomena, and offered only the unpalatable option of breaking the lease at the cost of my deposit. Unwilling to forfeit the money, I resigned myself to a new rule: daytime visits only. Leo, though he'd joke about the warehouse ghost, staunchly refused any further nighttime excursions, his humor barely concealing a genuine unease. I couldn't fault him. Sometimes, I still attempt to impose logic onto the experience. Steel and concrete structures do expand and contract with temperature shifts, potentially creating noises. Yet, this fails to account for the sound's consistent localization to one area, or its uncanny correlation with my movements, particularly my retreats. Perhaps some undiscovered structural anomaly exists. Installing audio recording cameras has crossed my mind, a way to capture objective evidence. But the prospect feels strangely intrusive, almost provocative. So, I continue to utilize the space for its intended purpose, strictly adhering to daylight hours. If sunset approaches before my work is done, I pack up and leave, facing that sound again. Especially alone, holds no appeal. It feels ignominious, this avoidance. But the memory of that grating, responsive noise is too visceral to ignore. Leo still rips me occasionally, but any suggestion of an evening trip is met with an immediate firm no thanks. My scheduling has become meticulous, ensuring I'm clear of the premises long before dusk settles. Weeks have passed without hearing the sound. Sometimes, the rational part of my brain wonders if we exaggerated it, imagined its intensity or responsiveness. But the memory remains sharp, corroborated by Leo's reaction. I yearn for a simple, mundane explanation, a faulty pipe, an electrical short, but evidence remains elusive. There is no dramatic climax here, no spectral reveal. Nothing has lunged from the shadows. No intruders, human or animal, have been discovered amongst the shelves. Yet, recalling the way that metallic scraping seemed to track us, to answer our movements down those concrete aisles, still sends a chill cascading down my spine. It was real enough to send two grown men fleeing into the night. That certainty remains irrefutable and inexplicable. It's just a warehouse rented for practical ends, utterly ordinary under the sun. But after dark, it holds an unnerving secret. That scraping sound, its origin unknown, its behavior reactive. I don't know what makes it or why it seems to listen. I only know it's there, and I have no desire to trespass on its nocturnal domain to find out more. Call it cowardice if you will. I prefer to call it prudence. For now, I maintain my distance when shadows lengthen, content to leave the unsettling enigma of the nighttime warehouse undisturbed. The imprints materialized from the dust of the derelict barn floor, stark declarations in the gloom. I was not the sole occupant of this wilderness, and whatever shared whisperwood with me wore human boots, not paws. I had sought refuge here, fled the city's relentless clangor, a maelstrom of looming deadlines, fractured affections, and the gnawing void within. A weekend immersed in primitive quiet, I'd reasoned, might scour the soul, realign the compass. A profound miscalculation. My first day unfolded with deceptive calm. Miles trekked into the whispering pines, a suitable hollow discovered for my canvas shelter, the afternoon given over to aimless wandering. As twilight bled across the sky, I gathered timber, coaxed flames to life, and surrendered to the vast stellar silence. Only with the dawn did the wrongness begin to creep in. My rucksack, diligently placed beside the tent flap, had migrated overnight. Animal curiosity, I first assumed, yet no fabric was rent, no buckle chewed, merely shifted. Unsettling, but easily dismissed. I proceeded with the day's plan. An almost imperceptible track beckoned, weaving deeper between colossal evergreens. The forest thickened, swallowing the path, the canopy knitting itself into an impenetrable roof. Sunlight fractured into scarce, slanted beams, painting the mossy floor with fugitive, spectral patterns. It was then I stumbled upon it. The old barn, slumped in a pocket clearing, its timbers bleached bone-gray by seasons uncounted, half devoured by grasping vines, decades derelict, perhaps a century. A pool stronger than caution drew me near. The door groaned, a low thrum of protest that vibrated through my bones as I shouldered it open. Inside, dimness reigned, disturbed only by motes pirouetting in the sparse shafts of light piercing the decaying walls. Rusted skeletal farm implements lay strewn like forgotten relics. But the floor commanded my gaze. There, pressed into the thick shroud of settled dust, were the footprints. Fresh, not the splayed tracks of deer or boar. Not my own boot tread. Human. Their sharp definition screamed recency. Hours, perhaps a day old at most. A frantic drummer took up residence behind my ribs. Who else haunted these remote depths? Miles lay between me and any charted path. The ranger's assurance echoed mockingly. Sole registered camper in this sector. As my vision adapted to the murk, other details surfaced. Discarded food wrappers, crumpled plastic bottles. Evidence of contemporary human presence. Yet this was no transient hiker's bivouac. The refuse huddled in a corner suggested prolonged occupation. And there, smeared across a warped plank wall in something that looked chillingly like desiccated blood, a stark command. They're coming. Run. I recoiled from the barn, air catching in my throat. Alien, all of it. The imperative was clear. Return to the tent, collapse the flimsy shelter, flee these woods. Turning, a glint snagged my eye. Nestled in the tall, whispering grass near the threshold lay a mobile phone. My fingers trembled as I retrieved it. The screen spiderwebbed with cracks, yet it held a charge. The home button yielded, and ice sluiced through my veins. A selfie beamed back. A young woman, Clara, smiling into the lens. But the date stamp beneath the time froze my blood. 3 days passed. Whoever owned this device had been here, intimately close in time. And the barn's grim tableau, that desperate scroll, implied her fate was anything but benign. Shoving the phone into my pocket, I plunged back towards my campsite, striving for speed cloaked in silence. The forest, tranquil mere hours ago, now felt suffocating, watchful. Each snapped twig was a gunshot. Every rustle in the undergrowth, a predator's advance. Bursting into the clearing, I halted, stunned. My tent wasn't merely disturbed. It had vanished. Utterly. Only the flattened patch of grass remained, a ghostly outline of its brief existence. My thoughts fragmented. Impossible! Who takes a tent? Why? Then, a colder realization. What if they remain? I spun, eyes darting, scanning the dense ring of trees encircling the empty space. A flicker, there, between two distant pines. The briefest impression of a figure melting back into shadow. Panic clamped down, visceral and absolute. Escape now, but where? In my urgent retreat from the barn, bearings had dissolved. The monolithic woods offered no distinction, no favor. I chose a direction blindly and ran. Branches lashed my face, unseen roots coiled like snares, seeking purchase on my ankles, yet I surged onward. Behind me, a heavy crashing through bracken. Pursuit, gaining ground. I ran until lungs burned like acid and legs turned to stone. Spent, I dove behind the immense girth of a fallen log, stifling ragged gasps against the rough bark. I strained, listening beyond my own frantic pulse. Silence, save for the wind sifting through leaves, the distant chatter of birds. Then, snap. A twig breaking nearby. Another. Footfalls measured, deliberate, drawing closer. Breath held captive, I pressed tighter against the log's decaying wood. The steps ceased, impossibly near, close enough to touch. Breathing audible now, harsh and labored. "Know you're there," rasped a voice low and gravelly. "Hiding's no good. Been watching. Since you came into our forest." Our forest? Who was this? And we? "Come on out," the voice commanded. "Might let you walk away clean." Might. My mind churned. Bolt again? Into what unknown quadrant of this labyrinth? And this presence, it knew the woods intimately. Resistance was folly. I carried no weapon, and the weight in those footsteps spoke of size, of strength. Options evaporated. Slowly I rose, hands lifted, palms out. "Coming out," I managed, voice a thin tremor. "No trouble. Just hiking." God turned around. Stepping clear of the log, I met him. Jedediah. He looked sculpted from the wilderness itself. Clothes ragged, dirt-caked, beard a wild, untamed thicket, but his eyes held the true terror, wide, alight with a feverish energy, a manic gleam. "Lost?" He spat the word like poison. "Nobody gets lost here. You're one of them, ain't ya? Sent to find us, drag us back." "I don't understand," I pleaded, striving for calm. "Just a camper. Found a phone back at the barn." His eyes flared at the mention of the phone. "Found it? Clara's phone? Where? Give it." He lunged, hands scrabbling at my pockets. I stumbled, caught a root, and went down hard. The phone skittered across the leaf litter between us. Jedediah snatched it, cradling it with unnerving tenderness. "She said they'd come," he muttered, gaze distant, directed inward. "Said we couldn't hide. Showed her, though. Yes, we showed her." A glacial dread traced its path down my spine as his fragmented words coalesced. Clara, the smiling face on the screen. What horrors had they shown her? "Listen," I said, pushing myself slowly upright. "Whatever's happening, I just want to leave. Point me to a road. I'll go. I won't say a word about you, this place." He studied me, those feral eyes narrowing. For a taut second, violence simmered. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a jagged, mirthless bark that clawed at the quiet air. "Leave," he echoed. "Oh, you ain't leaving. Seen too much now. No, you'll stay. Always room for more family." Before thought could translate to action, a blunt force slammed into the back of my skull. The world tilted, colors blurring. As consciousness frayed, vague shapes detached themselves from the trees, converging. Then only blackness. Time lost meaning. I returned to awareness in a space thick with the cloying scent of damp earth and rot. Darkness absolute. My hands bound tightly behind me, a rough gag biting into my mouth. As my eyes strained against the void, shapes began to resolve. Others, here with me, bound similarly. Some watched the impenetrable dark with wide, terrified eyes. Others lay still. Unconscious, I prayed. Movement scraped overhead. A rectangle of faint light appeared as a trapdoor swung upward. Jedediah's silhouette filled the opening, his face split by that same manic grin. "Welcome home," he crooned. "Welcome to the family. Don't you worry none. You'll learn to love it. They all do, eventually." The trapdoor slammed shut, plunging us back into suffocating darkness. The horrifying truth settled, cold and heavy. My retreat from life's chaos had led me directly into the jaws of an unimaginable nightmare. These woods guarded secrets far more monstrous than solitude. And the deepest horror? No one knew my destination. No search party would brave Whisperwood for Elias. In seeking escape, I had found only a deeper, darker captivity. Listening to the muffled weeping of my fellow prisoners in the Stygian depths, a single ember of defiance sparked within me. Somehow, some way, I would endure, I would escape, and these architects of suffering would answer. But for now, trapped in the belly of the earth, hope was a fragile, flickering thing. The only thing I had left. The first undeniable proof we were trespassers upon someone else's dread arrived, imprinted in the fine grey dust coating the floorboards of the derelict attraction. What had begun as a lark, a foray into the forbidden theatre of urban decay, was poised to curdle into a spectacle of fear none of us would ever truly exit. It was Elara's siren song, this venture into the skeletal remains of Wonderland Acres. She, the perpetually restless soul of our quartet, forever nudging us towards precipices, urging leaps from the mundane ledges of our lives. When she unveiled the photographs, a forgotten amusement park on the town's fringe, surrendered to ivy and time's slow erosion, the hook was set. How could we deny the allure? Our fellowship comprised Ilara, the fire starter, Reese, her devoted shadow, ever striving to mirror her flame, Maya, my confidant since childhood's earliest sketches, and myself, Leo, the anchor of caution invariably swept along in their impulsive tides. We breached the perimeter of Wonderland Acres as twilight bled across the sky, stretching spectral fingers over rusted turnstiles and signs whose painted promises had long faded into whispers. A decade or more, it had stood silent, shuttered after a cascade of misfortunes, accidents and insolvency its final curtain call. Now it loomed, a necropolis of nostalgia, its gaiety transmuted by the dying light into something profoundly unsettling. Magnificent, Alara breathed, the word catching in the charged air as we slipped through a mangled section of fence. Her eyes reflected the deepening gloom, alive with a thrill that, despite myself, ignited a flicker of anticipation within me. Down the ghost of a main promenade we ventured, flashlight beams dancing across blistered paint and shattered panes. The quiet was a wait, punctuated only by the gravel's complaint beneath our boots and the sporadic sigh of tormented metal surrendering to the breeze. The Palace of Giggles, Reese proposed, his light finding a crumbling structure adorned with a clown's faded visage. That painted smile, intended once for mirth, now stretched into a grotesque rictus, its eyes abyssal voids. Approaching, a detail snagged at my unease. The entrance, which logic dictated should be sealed by time and neglect, yielded effortlessly to Ilara's touch. Inside, our lights carved through the darkness, revealing a labyrinth of mirrors. Some were fractured webs of silver, others disconcertingly pristine. Over here, Maya's voice echoed, strangely multiplied by the reflective surfaces. She indicated the floor. There, stark against the settled dust, marched a distinct trail of footprints. Just other explorers, probably, Reese offered, though conviction frayed the edges of his voice. We pursued the prince deeper into the funhouse's distorted heart, past warped glass that twisted our forms into unnerving caricatures. With every step, a cold dread coiled tighter in my gut. These impressions were starkly recent. The dust around them barely resettled. Suddenly, a sharp intake of breath from Ilara. In the mirror, just a flash. Something that wasn't us. Tall it had been, impossibly so, limbs like spindly branches, its face swallowed by shadow. By the time my head snapped around, the reflection was empty, save for our own wide eyes. "You saw it?" Ilara's question was barely audible. Before reply could form, it came. A giggle, high-pitched, dissonant, skittering through the mirrored corridors. It resonated with nothing human. Raw panic seized us. We spun, desperate for retreat, but the funhouse disoriented, its reflections mocking our attempts to find the exit. Each corridor seemed to fold back on itself, offering only images of our mounting terror. The giggling drew nearer, now punctuated by footfalls. Not the steady tread of human gait, but the rapid, irregular patter of something multiple-limbed, scurrying. "There!" Reese yelled, gesturing towards the sliver of escaping moonlight. The exit. We erupted from the palace of giggles, lungs burning, gulping the cool night air. Relief flared, only to be instantly extinguished. As our vision pierced the gloom, we perceived the impossible. The entire park had animated. The skeletal Ferris wheel groaned, rotating slowly, its vacant carriages swaying like hanged men. The carousel horses, frozen mid-prance, began their circular journey, paint peeling beneath the spectral light. And sounds arose. The teeny, off-key lament of a calliope. The phantom murmur and laughter of a crowd long since departed. "We have to leave," Maya stammered, her voice trembling. No dissent arose. We bolted towards the entrance gates. They seemed to recede with every frantic step. The pathways writhed, unfamiliar, channeling us deeper into the park's awakened heart, not towards freedom. Passing the carousel's relentless spin, a sight froze the marrow in my bones. The painted steeds were no longer riderless. Shadow-draped figures occupied the saddles, features obscured, yet their eyes burned with an incandescent, unholy light. One turned its head, fixing its gaze upon me, its mouth stretching into a silent, cavernous scream. My legs churned faster. We found ourselves beneath the colossal lattice of the old wooden roller coaster, its structure silhouetted against the night like the rib cage of some leviathan. Along its tracks, the coaster cars were ascending, the rhythmic clack-clack-clack echoing like monstrous heartbeats. "This way," Ilara urged, pointing to a maintenance hatch nestled at the coaster's base. It was our sole refuge. Behind us, the scurrying pursuit intensified. The hatch opened into Stygian blackness, a tunnel burrowing beneath the ride. We plunged inside, flashlights struggling against the oppressive dark. The air hung thick, choked with dust and the clawing sweetness of decay. We hadn't advanced far when the hatch slammed shut behind us. The decisive click of a lock reverberated through the confined space. "No, no," Reese choked out, scrambling back, rattling the unyielding metal. Then came the voice. It wasn't heard so much as felt, bypassing ears to resonate directly within our skulls. "Welcome, players." It chimed, a sound laced with both bonhomie and profound malice. "You've entered Wonderland Acres after closing, a violation of the rules. But fret not, rule breakers are adored here. They make the game ever so much more vibrant." A single light flickered to life further down the tunnel, illuminating the path forward. Choice had evaporated. We followed. The tunnel disgorged us into a vast subterranean chamber, likely situated beneath the park's core. Detritus littered the floor. Dismembered ride components, fractured animatronic limbs. And in the center, a figure awaited. The entity from the mirror. Impossibly tall, gaunt, clad in the tattered regalia of a ringmaster. Its face was a smooth white mask, utterly featureless, save for two gaping black holes where eyes should be. "Let's commence the amusement, it declared, the voice emanating from the mask, yet still echoing inside our minds. "A simple contest. Navigate your way out of the park before the dawn breaks and your egress is granted. Fail and, well..." A languid gesture encompassed the broken figures strewn about. "You'll join the permanent collection." With the chilling peal of laughter that vibrated along my spine, the figure dissolved into nothingness, abandoning us in the cavernous silence. Hours warped into an eternity of searching, navigating lightless tunnels that emerged into disparate, nightmarish corners of the park. Each zone presented fresh horrors, clowns whose painted smiles stretched too wide, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth, plush toys that shifted position when backs were turned, shadows that elongated into grasping claws. We lost Reese first, swallowed by the deceptive reflections of the Hall of Mirrors, his scream abruptly silenced around a corner. Maya vanished within the haunted manor, dragged into suffocating darkness by something swift and unseen. Finally, only Alara and I remained, hands clasped tight, sprinting through the phantasmagoria Wonderland Acres had become. Ahead, salvation glimmered. The entrance gates catching the faint pre-dawn light, freedom felt impossibly close. Then, Ilara stumbled. As I pivoted to haul her up, I saw them. Swift, dark shapes converging from the periphery, closing in. Ilara met my gaze, her eyes vast pools of terror, laced with grim acceptance. "Go," she commanded, shoving me forward. "One of us survives." A heartbeat of indecision. A fracture in time where self-preservation warred with loyalty. That hesitation became my damnation. Icy grips seized me, yanking me backward, reeling me into the park's embrace. My final vision was of the sun's first ray kissing the metal gates, just as they slammed shut with resonating finality. Now I am woven into the fabric of Wonderland Acres, another exhibit, another consciousness ensnared in this perpetual twilight of terrifying games. Occasionally, I perceive new knots of explorers breaching the fence, lured by the same fatal curiosity that ensnared us. A silent scream builds within me to warn them, to plead for their retreat, but all I can offer is this fixed, painted smile, and the game begins anew. So, Should you ever pass a derelict place of amusement, its faded glory whispering invitations on the wind, recall this: some gates guard more than forgotten memories. Within places like Wonderland Acres, the revelry is eternal, as is the dread. Why I descended into the cellar that morning remains a hazy question, born perhaps of simple irritation. The hammer vanished from its usual haunts upstairs. The toolbox, mysteriously absent from the garage shelves. A mundane task awaited. Loose screws on a kitchen cabinet demanding attention. Yet my tools had conspired against me. So, muttering frustrations under my breath, I navigated the creaking steps downward, into the subterranean gloom where the old toolbox likely languished amongst the accumulated detritus of years. The single naked bulb flickered to life, casting long shadows from shelves laden with paint cans, stiffened rags, and the skeletal remains of furniture. Dust, thick and ancient, clogged the air, mingling with a staleness that coated the back of my throat. A dry cough rasped out as I shouldered aside leaning towers of cardboard. It was while wrestling with a particularly stubborn crate, its weight settling deep in my bones, that my gaze snagged on something incongruous. A doorway etched into the far concrete wall. A doorway I had absolutely no memory of. It possessed an unsettling foreignness, standing slightly ajar, a sliver of faint, jaundiced light spilling from within. Not a bright light, but the sickly glow reminiscent of a low wattage bulb lost down some endless, institutional passage. Logic insisted no door belonged there. That wall had always been an unbroken expanse of poured concrete. Unease coiled in my gut, a cold counterpoint to ordinary curiosity. My chest tightened. Drawn by an invisible thread, I moved closer, trying to reconcile the impossible presence before me with years of familiarity with this space. Yet there it stood, a door, half open, revealing the mouth of a narrow corridor I'd never known existed. Hesitantly, I peered inside. The passage stretched away, losing itself in the gloom. Its walls, rough-hewn concrete or something akin, stood unpainted and grim. Feeble bulbs, dangling at intervals from the oppressively low ceiling, provided the scant illumination, their intermittent flickers making the shadows writhe. The air tasted of stale stone and confinement. An odd pressure built in my ears as I tried to comprehend the corridor's impossible length. Its end remained unseen, simply receding into infinity. Confusion fogged my thoughts. This defied all reason. A powerful reluctance held me rooted, yet my feet, betraying my apprehension, carried me forward. Perhaps a flimsy rationalization surfaced. The toolbox had found its way here long ago, a forgotten act of storage. The thought felt absurd, yet no other explanation offered itself. I stood poised at the threshold, one foot planted on the familiar cellar floor, the other testing the uneven ground of the corridor. Ducking instinctively beneath a low-slung support beam, I pushed the door wider. Its hinges emitted a faint, protesting squeal. "Hello?" The word felt small, swallowed by the oppressive space. It echoed back, but strangely altered, distorted, as if my own voice, detached and distant, answered from the depths. The fine hairs on my neck prickled. A leaden weight settled in my stomach, and suddenly I was acutely aware of the rasp of my own breathing, the frantic drumbeat of my pulse against my temples. Silence pressed in again, broken only by my respiration and the low, almost subliminal hum of the failing lights. Just as I resolved to retreat, to pull that impossible door shut and erase this anomaly from my mind, I registered footsteps. Faint at first, soft, rhythmic taps against stone or concrete, their origin indistinct, seeming to emanate from the corridor's unseen reaches. "Who's there?" I called out again, louder this time. The echo returned, that same warped mimicry mocking my query. My throat constricted. A tremor ran through my legs. Enough. I would leave, and now. I spun around, hand reaching for the doorframe, the comforting solidity of the known basement beyond. But there was nothing. Only blank, unyielding wall. The same rough texture as the corridor surrounding me. Panic flared, hot and sharp. I slammed my palms against the surface, scrabbling with my fingernails, seeking a seam, a handle, any sign of the passage I'd just entered. Solid stone met my frantic touch. The door, the entrance, had vanished. A clammy heat broke across my forehead. I swiped at it with the back of my hand. Turning slowly, I faced the corridor again. It stretched before me and, impossibly, behind me. Utterly identical. The same flickering bulbs marched into the distance in both directions. My heart hammered against my ribs. I must have become disoriented, spun around without realizing. I began walking back the way I thought I'd come, perhaps 20 paces. My shoes scuffing the gritty floor, the narrowness forced my shoulders to brush the rough walls occasionally. The low ceiling kept my head perpetually bowed. After those 20 steps, I stopped. Nothing had changed. No door, no exit, just endless repeating corridor. I listened intently. The footsteps resumed, closer now, more distinct. I called out a third time, my voice strained. No reply, only that twisted echo reverberating back, making my skull ache. "Focus," I told myself. "Fight the rising tide of panic." My phone. It was in my pocket. I fumbled it out, the screen casting an eerie glow. No signal bars. The battery icon seemed stable, yet the phone itself felt unnaturally warm in my hand. I activated the flashlight. It flickered on, but its beam pulsed in unsettling synchronicity with the corridor's own erratic lights, offering little additional illumination. The oppressive sameness stretched in every direction. I chose the direction arbitrarily and began walking, keeping my right hand trailing against the cold, abrasive wall. If I maintained a straight path, surely I would encounter something, an end, a turn, anything. After a minute of shuffling progress, a subtle change. The corridor began a gentle curve to the left. Leaning forward, I peered around the bend. More corridor. Identical bulbs, identical flicker. The sound of my own breathing filled my ears, loud and ragged. The pervasive smell of dust and stagnant air offered no respite. My chest remained tight. Swallowing became a conscious effort. I pressed onward, step by deliberate step, pausing frequently to listen. Sometimes, the phantom footsteps whispered behind me. Other times, only the low buzz of the lights answered the silence. My stomach clenched with hunger. I hadn't eaten since morning. A parched, thick feeling coated my tongue. Panic gnawed at the edges of my resolve, threatening to dissolve thought into raw fear. Find an exit. Focus. My hand continued its sweep along the wall, gathering a fine film of grit. At one point, my fingers traced what felt like a hairline fracture, a seam in the stone. I followed it, hopefully, but it petered out, just an imperfection in the surface. Pushing against it yielded nothing. Stopping, I bent my knees slightly, resting my weary legs. I strained my ears. A new sound. A faint, dry scraping, like a shoe being dragged hesitantly across concrete. It came from behind me. I whirled, phone light stabbing into the gloom. Empty corridor. A jolt of adrenaline shot through me, leaving my fingers tingling and my legs feeling strangely weak, gritting my teeth. I pushed forward again, faster now, desperation lending speed to my aching limbs. I walked until my muscles burned, until the monotonous repetition of the walls began to blur. No doors, no windows, no variation, just endless corridor. Eventually, another slight turn materialized. I followed it, clinging to the hope of difference. The air here felt marginally cooler. I noticed one overhead bulb flickered at a slower, more languid pace. Reaching up, my fingertips brushed its surface. Warm. I tried twisting it, thinking perhaps I could shatter it. Use a shard to carve, to mark, to fight back somehow. But it was screwed in tight, threatening to burn my fingers. I let it go, trudging onward. My watch still ticked, but the second hand stuttered occasionally, skipping beats. I couldn't trust it. Time had become elastic, meaningless. Hours might have passed. The gnawing hunger intensified, and my throat felt raw. I licked my cracked lips, seeking non-existent moisture. My heart beat a steady, heavy rhythm, but my head felt light, disconnected. Keep walking. The urge to scream for help rose again, but I suppressed it. Each shout only brought back that disquieting, distorted echo. That other self mocking me from the stone. I tried different words. My name, random phrases. Always the same warped reply. At some point, desperate for any external sign, I started pressing my ear flat against the walls. Listening for sounds beyond, for any hint of the world outside this passage. Nothing but a profound, dull silence. I rapped the surface with my knuckles. Solid. I kicked it with my heel. Unyielding. I moved on. I needed to mark my path. Rummaging in my pocket, my fingers closed around a house key. I scraped its teeth against the rough wall, managing to leave a faint, silvery scratch. Then I walked forward, counting my steps, navigating several more turns. When I checked the wall again, searching for my mark, it was gone. Had I circled back already? Or did the corridor itself rearrange when unobserved? I tried walking backward, fixing my gaze on a particular stain on the ceiling, but the uneven floor nearly sent me sprawling. The corridor remained stubbornly, terrifyingly consistent. The scratches I made vanished as if absorbed by the stone. The footsteps returned, undeniably louder now, closer. Not hurried, just deliberate, steady steps. "Show yourself," I yelled, voice cracking. The echo twisted my words, and this time, a faint whisper seemed to trail at its end, like static discharge. I ran. A primal instinct took over, a desperate need to confront whatever pursued me, or perhaps just to flee blindly. I ran until my lungs burned, until I slammed my shoulder hard against the unyielding wall, cursing through clenched teeth. The sharp, grounding pain brought me to a halt. I listened. Silence. No footsteps. No whispers. My phone's battery indicator had dipped alarmingly low. I toggled the flashlight off, conserving power, relying on the sickly ambient light. The bulbs overhead continued their erratic performance, buzzing and flickering. I noticed a disturbing phenomenon. Sometimes, they would dim collectively, plunging the corridor into near darkness. In those moments, the space felt tangibly smaller, the walls pressing in, brushing against my shoulders. When they brightened again, the illusion of space returned. Perhaps it was exhaustion playing tricks on my perception, but the feeling was visceral, real. I resumed walking, slower now, conserving energy. My feet throbbed inside my shoes. Each step scraped, raising puffs of fine dust that tasted bitter on my tongue and irritated my nostrils. My shirt clung damply to my back. Rubbing my itching eyes did little to relieve the dryness. After navigating another series of identical turns, I encountered something new. A small metal junction box affixed to the left wall. Hope surged, irrational but potent. I fumbled with the lid, prying at its rusted edge. It groaned open, revealing a tangle of ancient-looking wires and a single, stark toggle switch. I flipped it down. The corridor lights stuttered violently, threatening to extinguish altogether. I flipped it back up. They returned to their previous unreliable flickering. Useless but different. I tugged at the wires. They held fast. Closing the box with a metallic clang, I continued my journey. From behind me, I thought I heard the faintest exhalation, a soft sigh in the stillness. I spun around, heart leaping. Nothing. Just the empty waiting corridor. I moved on. I tried counting my steps again, focusing on the numbers. 1, 2, 3, losing track somewhere in the hundreds. No change. Just more corridor. My mouth felt like sandpaper. I stopped, leaning heavily against the wall to catch my breath. A faint vibration hummed through the stone beneath my hand. A low thrumming, as if unseen machinery pulsed deep within the walls. Pressing my ear against the concrete again, confirmed it. No sound, just that subtle, deep tremor. A reminder that this place, whatever it was, might not be stable. I pushed myself upright and resumed walking. It couldn't be infinite. It had to lead somewhere. The thought of breaking a bulb returned. Maybe a shard, a tool, anything. I reached for the nearest one. Warm, smooth glass. I gripped it firmly and twisted. It resisted then. With a grating sound came loose in my hand. The corridor dimmed slightly further. Carefully, I placed the bulb on the floor and brought my heel down hard. It popped with a satisfying crunch. Tiny glass fragments scattered. I picked up the largest shard, nicking my finger in the process. The sharp sting, the taste of my own blood as I sucked the small wound, felt grounding. I used the shard to gouge at the wall, trying to carve a deeper, more permanent mark. The glass edge quickly dulled against the stubborn stone, leaving little more than a faint scratch. Still, I kept the shard, clutching it tightly between my fingers. I walked forward with renewed caution. The corridor remained unchanged, but now, one socket overhead was empty. That was my marker. If I circled back and found that empty socket again, I'd know for sure. I walked for what felt like an eternity, past countless, intact, flickering bulbs. My legs trembled with fatigue. Thirst was a constant torment. My eyes burned. Eventually, I rounded another bend. I looked up, scanning the ceiling. All the bulbs were present, none missing. Relief warred with exhaustion. Perhaps I was making progress. Then, the footsteps returned right behind me, closer than ever. I spun quickly, shouting defiance into the oppressive space. Only the distorted echo answered. I stumbled backward a few steps, eyes fixed on the empty stretch of corridor behind me, feeling the rough walls scrape against my shoulders. My back hit something solid. I turned. Just more wall, more corridor. I kept going. Time dissolved. The corridor stretched on, an endless repeating nightmare. I grew weaker, my steps shuffling, but some stubborn instinct propelled me forward. And then finally, something different. A small indentation in the wall, low down. My hand exploded, finding cold metal. A recessed door handle. Hope flared again, fierce and painful. I pulled, stuck fast. I braced my foot against the opposite wall, throwing my weight into it, pulling with all my remaining strength. A low groan, a screech of tortured metal. A faint puff of musty, stagnant air whispered out. I yanked again, grunting with the effort, and the door creaked open, just wide enough to squeeze through. I stumbled into a small cubicle room, lit by a single dim bulb overhead. It was utterly bare, save for a rough wooden crate slumped in one corner. The floor was thick with dust and loose pebbles. My eyes darted around. One wall held the door I'd just forced. Another held a second door. This one closed, secured with a simple metal latch. My heart hammered. I lunged for the latch door, fumbled it open. It revealed a short flight of concrete steps leading upward. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost buckled my knees. I scrambled up the steps, perhaps 20 in all, each one coated in dust and fine debris. At the summit, a plain wooden door. I reached for the knob, turned it. Stiff, but it yielded. Pushing the door open, I stepped through, into my own basement. The familiar shapes of the old shelves, the stacked paint cans, the broken chair loomed in the dim light. I spun around. The door I had just emerged from was shut tight. I reached for the knob again, but my fingers met only solid, uninterrupted concrete wall. No seam, no handle, no sign that a door had ever existed there. The crushing weight on my chest eased slightly. Mechanically, I reached up and switched off the single basement bulb, plunging the space back into darkness, then climbed the stairs to the kitchen. I closed the basement door firmly behind me and slid the bolt across. At the sink, I splashed cold water on my face, then drank deeply, glass after glass. I sank onto a kitchen stool, my body trembling, my heart still racing against my ribs. What had happened? How had that impossible corridor existed? And how had the exit simply vanished? The questions hammered at me, but I had no answers. Only the lingering chill of the experience. I felt no urge to speak of it, to try and explain the inexplicable. I just sat there, breathing, anchoring myself to the solid reality of my kitchen. A glance at the clock confirmed it. Late afternoon. Hours had bled away down there. Later, numbly, I went upstairs, checking each room with a strange sense of detachment. In a bedroom closet, tucked behind some boxes, I found them, my hammer and the missing toolbox. I carried them down and placed them on the kitchen table. Their mundane solidity, a stark contrast to the unreality I'd escaped. The faint, gritty taste of dust still lingered in my mouth. I tried to slip back into the rhythm of normalcy, but the edges felt frayed. I never went looking for that strange doorway again. The basement remained just a basement, cluttered and ordinary, but the memory persisted. A cold spot in the back of my mind. The thought of those endless flickering passages. The unnerving echo of my own voice. The soft, persistent footsteps somewhere behind me. I knew, with absolute certainty, I never wanted to hear them again. From the instant my boots touched this soil, a dissonance hummed beneath the surface. Outwardly, the property presented an unassuming facade, a weather-scoured farmhouse, fields surrendering to wild growth. But the discovery, on my second day ensconced here, of those subterranean warrens that initiated a cold dread coiled in my gut, a knot that hasn't loosened its grip. No mention of them exists in the county ledgers. Townsfolk offer blank stares or swift diversions when questioned. Now I am entangled in deciphering a phenomenon that refuses stasis, shifting its nature with each sunrise. I am, by inclination, a man of simple needs. This acreage was acquired for its promise of solitude, a sanctuary where my endeavors could unfold unburdened by proximate humanity. Yet, that second day, in the dilapidated barn standing sentinel at the property's edge, I observed a subsidence in the earthen floor. Not the clean void of a sinkhole, but a peculiar loosening of the soil. Curiosity overriding caution, I scraped away the debris, revealing the maw of what appeared to be a man-hewn burrow. It gaped wider than anticipated, spacious enough for passage, provided one stooped low. Initially, descent held no appeal. A strangeness lingered, however, an exhalation from below. A subtle subterranean respiration carried the scent of stale, confined air. An acrid dryness coated my tongue, yet an inexplicable magnetism held me captive. Retrieving a flashlight and a rudimentary dust mask from my truck, I rationalized it as mere reconnaissance. A swift look. That resolve dissolved upon entry. The temperature plummeted as I climbed down. Tunnel walls, raw earth scored by primitive tools, offered no evidence of modern shoring. My flashlight's beam carved a fragile circle of illumination, beyond which lay an impenetrable void. My own respiration echoed unnaturally loud, each scuff of my boots shadowed by a phantom resonance, a mimicking reverberation trailing just behind. Instinctively, I'd glance back, heart slamming against my ribs, startled anew each time. It evoked forgotten childhood terrors of darkened basements. A feeling I tried to dismiss as aberrant sonics. Acoustic trickery inherent to the passage. Peace, however, remained elusive. Perhaps 30 yards in, the tunnel's composition shifted. Sections of crumbling brick interrupted the earthen walls, interspersed with crudely fitted stones resembling rudimentary foundations. Glyphs adorned these surfaces, small, incised markings I couldn't decipher. At first glance, random scratches, yet tracing them with a gloved finger revealed a deliberate, purposeful quality. Triangles, circles, shapes hinting at forgotten languages. My phone, predictably devoid of signal, rendered only distorted images. Photographic failures, despite its usual low-light competence. A flicker of frustration surfaced, but the tunnel beckoned onward. I arrived at a bifurcation. One passage descended steeply, the other veered left. Just then, my flashlight sputtered, the beam faltering. I rapped the casing sharply, desperate to maintain illumination. My nerves, already frayed, screamed for retreat as I pivoted. An icy caress brushed against my nape. A breath devoid of warmth, though I stood utterly alone. I spun, sweeping the light through the empty passage. Nothing. Strength leached from my legs. Backing away slowly, I navigated towards the entrance. Emerging into the stinging sunlight was a profound relief. Reality flooding back. My clothes bore the earth's grime. Sweat slicked my skin despite the subterranean chill. That evening became a descent into archives and inquiries. County records remained stubbornly silent. A neighbor, encountered earlier in town, met my questions with a peculiar opacity, professing ignorance before abruptly changing the topic. Sleep offered little respite, punctuated by imagined scrabblings from beneath the floorboards. Morning found me acquiring better armaments, a more potent lumen, spare batteries, a robust lantern, coils of marker rope, and a notebook for cartography. It felt excessive, yet control, however illusory, seemed paramount. Back within the barn's skeletal frame, I slipped once more into the earth's embrace, suppressing the residual apprehension. The main artery initially appeared unchanged. The atmosphere grew ponderous. The taste of dust returned. My breathing sounded labored in the stillness. I anchored the lantern near the entrance, a beacon in the gloom, then began paying out the rope along one wall, a lifeline back to the known world. Or so I believed. 15 minutes elapsed. I reached a section utterly transformed. The intersection I remembered, the downward slope, the leftward turn, had vanished. In its place, the tunnel described a gentle curve to the right, illogical, impossible. Yesterday's geography erased, replaced. My rope snaked confidently into this new corridor as if it had always belonged there. A prickling unease crawled over my flesh. My hands grew clammy. How could solid earth reconfigure its own geography? Stifling panic, I pressed onward, the flashlight beam probing the walls for the familiar glyphs. 10 feet further, they reappeared, carved deeper now, more intricate than those I'd noted previously. Touching one set, I felt minute ridges, disturbingly like fresh work. The rope, my supposed constant, felt taut and secure in my grasp, urging me forward. After some distance, a new draft manifested, capricious in its temperature. Warm, then cold, then warm again, ghosting across my exposed arms. The hairs on my neck prickled as a sound materialized, a sibilant murmur shaping itself into my name. Silas, it whispered. A faint, dry hiss. A visceral clenching seized me. My light stabbed wildly into the darkness. Empty. Who's there? My voice fractured, echoing back in a cacophony of self, overlapping layers of sound. Silence answered, thick and watchful, save for more whispers, too faint now to pass. Sweat soaked through my shirt. My breathing grew shallow. Retreat beckoned, yet a cognitive burr, an intellectual compulsion for answers propelled me deeper. By the time I entered what seemed a small chamber, roughly 10 feet across with a low ceiling, a third of my rope lay behind me. Glyphs saturated every surface here, encircling the space in rows of cryptic patterns, triangles, circles, jagged forms reminiscent of script, yet utterly alien. My chest constricted upon noticing a section of the floor in one corner, darker than the surrounding earth, an indelible discoloration, as if something had permanently stained the soil. Touching it gingerly revealed nothing conclusive. Oil, perhaps, or something else entirely. As I knelt, my flashlight beam snagged on another opening across the chamber, leading further into the unknown. Standing, the familiar weight of unseen scrutiny pressed down. The lantern's distant glow offered no solace. The flashlight was my sole companion. It flickered again. A sharp tap steadied the beam, but my pulse leaped. I attempted to sketch the chamber and my route in the notebook. A simple line, marking distance, direction. Yet my internal compass spun wildly. Spatial logic dissolved. Had I turned right once? Twice? My head began to pound. My hand trembled as I scrawled a note, the act feeling futile even as I performed it. Then, behind me, a faint, chitinous clicking, staccato rhythm like bone on stone. I whipped around, light slashing across the walls. Nothing. The clicking ceased, swallowed by the profound silence. Sweat trickled down my neck. My mouth felt parched. My heartbeat a frantic drum against my ribs. Enough. I had to follow the rope out. The tension across my shoulders was a physical ache. Retracing my path along the rope for perhaps 5 minutes brought me to an abrupt halt. A solid wall of earth where passage had existed moments before. My light played over the obstruction. Seamless, absolute. I tugged the rope. It disappeared directly into the packed dirt. A jolt of raw terror shot through me. This defied reason. Pulling harder, a length of the rope slithered free from behind the earthen barrier, loose, untethered. It hadn't been secured. It had simply ended there. A frustrated shout escaped me, echoing strangely. The rope, my guide, was now useless. The tunnel behind me had healed over, the earth reclaiming its passage. No choice remained but to venture forward again. Instinct warred with panic. I forced slow sips of water from my canteen, commanded my lungs to draw steady breaths. Heart hammering. I moved back towards the chamber, took the other opening. My flashlight beam became an extension of my frantic senses, scrutinizing every inch of wall for escape, for any hint of fresh air. The echoes persisted, always slightly asynchronous, mocking my movements. The faint tang of oxidation, an iron-rich scent, touched the air. My stomach churned, but I advanced. Another 10 minutes, perhaps, led to a passage so low it demanded I crawl. The ceiling barely 5 feet high, the ground treacherous beneath. Knees shaking, breath catching, I pushed through. My free hand trailed along the wall, registering the rough textures of dirt and stone. Patches of dampness met my touch. Groundwater seeping through, numbing my fingertips with its chill. Rounding a bend, I perceived a faint luminescence ahead. Not sunlight, but a pale, almost cerulean glow, flickering softly around another turn. I extinguished my flashlight momentarily. The glow persisted, ethereal and strange. My heart felt poised to burst, yet curiosity eclipsed fear. Following the light led to a small alcove. The source, a tiny fissure in the wall, scarcely an inch wide. Within it, something resembling a shard of glass or crystal pulsed with faint radiance. I reached out, hesitated. The light seemed to throb, a subtle undulation. My skin prickled. Leaving it untouched, I stepped back, reactivating my flashlight, searching. A narrow side passage, previously unnoticed, presented itself. So constricted, I would have to navigate it sideways. The suffocating embrace of earth threatened. My chest felt tight. Visions of becoming wedged, trapped, assailed me. Yet the corridor behind offered only the sealed dead end. Forward was the only vector. I eased into the fissure, shoulders scraping against cold earth. My flashlight flickered, dimmed. A curse died on my lips. Then a low groan from the deep earth, a subterranean tremor vibrating through the ground. Fear washed over me in an icy wave, yet I forced my body onward. Stale air, thick with dust that coated my tongue. My limbs felt leaden. I nearly dropped the light, stumbling on loose soil, catching myself just in time. The narrow squeeze yielded to another area, ceiling slightly higher. Straightening, I swept the light around. More inscriptions, larger here, gouged with greater force. A pressure built in my ears, the sensation of profound depth. Swallowing hard provided minimal relief. And then the whisper, intimate, directly beside my ear. My name, drawn out in a slow hiss. Silas! I spun, shouting, "Stop!" My voice cracked. Darkness met my eyes. My flashlight beam fell upon trails of disturbance on the ground, evidence of something heavy displaced. My heart hammered violently. The hair on my arm stood erect. Retreating from the marks, I scanned desperately for egress. That's when I felt it. A faint current against my cheek from the right. Cleaner air, fresher. I lunged towards it, heedless of potential danger. Escape was the only imperative. The airflow guided me to an upward angling slope. Steep, I clawed at the soil, digging in with hands and feet. Dirt crumbled, sending me sliding back more than once, elbows scraping raw. Flashlight clenched between my teeth, tasting of metal and earth, every muscle strained, fueled by a desperate yearning for daylight, for open space. At the crest, a small aperture. Through it, a fragile promise of daylight, filtered through a dense mesh of roots and undergrowth. Relief surged, potent and overwhelming. I scrambled, clawing my way out, heedless of tearing fabric or abrading skin. Finally, I thrust my head through, emerging into the base of a shallow ravine near the property's boundary. I collapsed onto the earth, panting, limbs turned to water. For long moments, I knelt, simply breathing, coaxing my frantic heart towards a steadier rhythm. When I finally gained my feet, shaky and disoriented, I realized my position. Far from the barn. Recognizable trees dotted the landscape, but I was a good half-mile from the farmhouse. The distance traversed underground felt impossible. Glancing back at the hole from which I'd emerged, it seemed partially obscured by brambles, the darkness within absolute, betraying no discernible path, as if the tunnels had reshaped themselves the instant I vacated them. The walk back to the house was undertaken on unreliable supports, each rustle of leaves triggering a flinch. My mind replayed the whispers, the discordant echoes, the feeling of being pursued. Reaching the porch, I found myself still clutching the flashlight, a talisman against the encroaching dark. Dirt matted my hair, lodged beneath my nails. My throat felt raw. What in God's name is happening down there? I rasped to the empty air. I record this because silence is no longer tenable. Each subsequent descent confirms the labyrinth's sentience. The layout invariably shifts. Maps become obsolete before the ink dries. Markers vanish or migrate to unexplored passages. My name whispered on stale currents. The persistent sensation of being followed, observed. The air remains heavy, oppressive. My light sources prove consistently unreliable. Sleep is fragmented, haunted by the knowledge of what stirs beneath my feet. This place is more than inert tunnels. It feels aware, ancient, and it exerts a subtle gravity, drawing me back into its mutable depths. I wish I could sever the connection, abandon this ground, but it is mine now. I'm bound to it, and it seems intent on reminding me, with chilling intimacy, that I'm not alone here. The first siren tore through the night's stillness, a jagged sound ripping me from shallow sleep. For a disoriented heartbeat, it felt imagined, an alien shriek in the quiet sanctuary of Riverbend Camp, nestled innocently below the colossal old dam. But the wail intensified, breeding siblings until a discordant chorus clawed at the darkness and the chilling certainty bloomed. This wasn't sleep's distortion. This was a waking nightmare unfurling. I'd sought refuge here at Riverbend 3 days prior, hoping the murmur of water and whisper of pines would smooth the ragged edges of a brutal month's work. The campsite, offering a panorama of the vast reservoir held captive by the immense hydroelectric structure, had promised serenity. Yes, there had been whispers, quiet anxieties exchanged between campers about the incessant rains, the water creeping higher against the concrete behemoth. I'd waved them off. Decades it had stood, an unwavering sentinel. Surely, a little deluge wouldn't trouble it. How utterly naive. Now lurching from my tent into the impenetrable black. That dismissal felt like madness. The sirens screamed on, relentless, underscored by rising shouts, the sharp notes of human panic echoing between the trees. My fingers, clumsy with dread, found my flashlight. Its beam sliced through the dark, illuminating a scene of pure pandemonium. Figures darted everywhere, spectral in pajamas, clutching random possessions. Children wailed, dogs erupted in frantic barking, and over it all, the sirens poured their venomous warning. My light swept towards the dam, a looming absence against the starless sky. And there, at its monumental base, a vision froze the marrow in my bones. Water, violent and foaming, spilling over the crest in ragged torrents. The structure wasn't just stressed, it was hemorrhaging. The dam was breaking. The truth struck with physical force. We were squarely in the path of annihilation. If that wall gave way entirely, the valley, the campground, us, we would be scoured from existence in mere moments. Action, immediate and absolute, was required. Adrenaline ignited my veins. I plunged back into the tent, snatching my pack, ramming essentials inside: phone, wallet, a single water bottle. Nothing else mattered. Bursting out again, I nearly slammed into Elias, the elderly gentleman from the adjacent site with whom I'd shared coffee and quiet conversation. "High ground," he yelled, his voice strained against the cacophony, his eyes wide mirrors of terror. "There's a path, up the ridge behind us. Our only way." I fell in beside him without a word, propelled towards the dark embrace of the woods. Chaos swirled around us. A woman dragging a shrieking toddler, her face a mask of desperation. A knot of teenagers, frozen, caught between flight and disbelief, and piercing through it all, that ceaseless siren song, now horrifically harmonized by a new sound. The deep, sickening groan of concrete surrendering to immense pressure. The trail Elias spoke of was scarcely more than a game track, a treacherous ribbon swallowed by shadows, revealed only fleetingly by my wavering light. We scrambled upward, loose stones skittering underfoot, grasping at exposed roots on the uneven incline. Behind us, the sounds of pursuit, ragged gasps, muffled cries, as others stumbled in the oppressive dark. Perhaps 5 minutes we climbed, 5 minutes of burning lungs and frantic motion, when a sound, like the sky cracking open, obliterated everything else. Even above the sirens, the shouts, it was a deafening final punctuation. Elias and I froze, compelled to look back. In the ghostly ambient light, I witnessed it. A vast central section of the dam, imploding, buckling inward. Water erupted through the breach, an instantaneous wall of liquid fury, churning with foam and debris, consuming the world below. The campground vanished. Tents, trailers, vehicles becoming insignificant specks swallowed by the deluge. "Move!" Elias's cry was raw, primal. "Run or we die!" We clawed our way upward with a desperation born of witnessing oblivion. Hands scrabbled at the earth, pulling on roots, hauling ourselves up by the lowest branches. The roar of the floodwaters swelled, a physical presence that seemed to vibrate the very air, swallowing the sirens whole. I felt the ground shudder beneath me, the hill itself trembling before the unleashed power. Somewhere behind, a scream was abruptly silenced. I didn't look back. I couldn't. My entire existence contracted to the patch of ground illuminated by my flashlight, the next handhold, the next agonizing step. Lungs seared, muscles screamed, but instinct propelled me onward. To pause was unthinkable. To pause was death. Time dissolved. Minutes bled into an eternity measured only by the rough caress of bark, the fire in my thighs, and the omnipresent thundering roar at my back. Then, blessedly, the brutal incline began to relent. The ground flattened beneath my feet. We had reached a small plateau, perched high above the vanished world. I collapsed, knees hitting the damp earth, breath tearing through my throat. My body racked with tremors of exhaustion and lingering terror. As the frantic hammering in my chest began to subside, I registered the presence of others. A scattered constellation of survivors, perhaps 20, 30 souls, had clawed their way to this precarious sanctuary. Some wept quietly, Others sat immobile, their faces vacant with shock. Elias stood near the precipice, a silhouette against the lightening sky, gazing down into the churning abyss. I crawled to his side, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach, needing to see, yet fearing what the dawn would reveal. The vista that unfolded in the pale, emergent light would forever be etched behind my eyelids. Where Riverbend Camp had rested peacefully just hours before, now stretched a vast, turbulent expanse of muddy water, littered with the wreckage of the world it had consumed. Trees jutted from the flood at grotesque angles. Here and there, the metallic glint of a submerged vehicle caught the nascent light. Of the dam, the monumental structure that had defined the landscape, nothing remained visible. It lay drowned beneath the very element it was built to control. As dawn fully broke, the scale of the catastrophe became horrifyingly clear. The entire valley was submerged, transformed into a desolate muddy sea. Distant rooftops breached the surface. Farmhouses, barns, generational landmarks reduced to lonely islands in the destructive tide. And drifting upon that surface, grim testament to the night's toll, were shapes. Shapes I forced my eyes away from, yet could not entirely unsee. We huddled on that wind-swept outcrop for hours, silent witnesses to the aftermath, until the thrum of helicopters broke the unnatural quiet. Searchlights swept the drowned valley. Eventually, rescue crews reached our small band, offering water, blankets, and a promise of extraction. Being hoisted into the rescue basket, ascending towards the hovering machine, I cast one final look below. The dam, so solid, so permanent mere days ago, was gone. In its place, a raw, gaping wound upon the land, a terrifying testament to nature's indifferent power, and a stark lesson in the terrifying fragility of all we deem secure. In the days and weeks that followed, the narrative of the disaster took shape. Neglect, compounded by weeks of relentless rain, had fatally weakened the old structure. The floodwaters had carved a path of destruction, claiming dozens of lives, erasing livelihoods, tallying damages in the billions. Investigations commenced. Blame was assigned. Solemn vows of future vigilance were made. But for those of us who had scrabbled up that dark hillside with the roaring tide licking at our heels, no report, no promise could ever dilute the visceral memory. The shriek of the sirens, the earth-shattering roar of the collapse, the desperate, lung-bursting climb, these became indelible parts of our being, brutal reminders of both our frailty and our stubborn will to survive. Even now, years removed, I sometimes wake abruptly in the deep night, heart pounding, certain I hear the distant, mournful wail of flood sirens. In those still dark moments, as I consciously slow my breathing, my thoughts drift to Elias and the others who shared that terrifying ascent. Do they too carry the weight of that night? Do they, like me, perceive the world through a slightly altered lens? More attuned to its inherent dangers, perhaps, but also more profoundly grateful for its fleeting beauty, for the simple, precious gift of another sunrise. And I remember those who didn't reach the plateau, whose names became statistics, whose futures were extinguished in the space of one catastrophic night. I promised myself then, as I do every time the memories surface, to inhabit my life fully, deeply, to never again take for granted the reassuring solidity of the ground beneath my feet, or a profound blessing of a quiet, unbroken night. Because that night taught me, with brutal clarity, that everything solid can dissolve in an instant. And when it does, all that remains is to run, to climb, and to pray you're standing when the dawn finally breaks. The first time my eyes registered the sigils, I dismissed them as errant gouges in timber, perhaps the idle work of some disaffected youth, or merely the scars left by indifferent seasons upon the old barn's frame. Yet, as fingertips traced the coarse incisions, a profound disquiet, cold and sharp, pierced through me. These were no random etchings. Patterns coalesced, intricate and imbued with an unnerving deliberateness. A deep, visceral certainty resonated within. They constituted a warning, an omen we tragically failed to comprehend. My name is Ilara. This chronicle recounts how my family's pursuit of renewal curdled into a persistent malady of the waking hours. It commenced 3 months prior, when my husband, Reese, accepted a position in a diminutive town nestled far from the city's clamor. Years of urban existence had worn us thin, submerged us in debt and anxiety. Thus, the prospect of relocating to a quieter, more forgiving landscape felt like deliverance. We seized it. Our children, Cora and Finn, harbored reservations about abandoning their companions. Yet we painted the move as a grand expedition into the unknown. The farmhouse we acquired possessed an allure that transcended its age. It whispered of history through its exposed wooden beams, offered solace on its wraparound porch, and commanded acres that unfurled like a forgotten map. The agent termed it a renovator's delight, a euphemism for demanding extensive labor. But Reese and I welcomed the endeavor. Initial weeks blurred into a frenzy of unpacking crates, applying fresh paint, and charting the boundaries of our new domain. The children's initial reluctance dissolved amidst the thrill of open fields and climbable trees. Reese immersed himself in restoration projects, while I coaxed life from the soil in a nascent vegetable garden. It seemed finally that the foundations of our long-imagined life were being laid. Then commenced the subtle disturbances, easily dismissed at first, yet growing insistent, harder to rationalize as days bled into weeks. It began with nocturnal acoustics. In the profound stillness when the house breathed deepest, we discerned creaks and groans emanating from within the partitions. Reese attributed it to the house settling, its ancient bones adjusting. I clung to his explanation, though the sounds bore no resemblance to the natural size of timber. They mimicked furtive footfalls, susurrations hovering just beyond the threshold of hearing. Then manifested the zones of unnatural cold. Specific loci within the house would plummet in temperature. Abrupt pockets of frostiness even under the blaze of the summer sun. Passing through them felt like breaching the airlock of a sepulchre. The children instinctively began to shun these areas, murmuring about a strange feeling. But it was the barn that truly unsettled my core. Standing detached from the house, weathered yet resolute, it had initially escaped our focused attention. One afternoon, however, with the children dispatched to school and Reese occupied elsewhere, curiosity compelled me towards it. The immense door groaned a protest as I forced it inward, disturbing motes, that danced like spectral plankton in the sunbeams lancing through wall fissures. An aroma of desiccated hay mingled with something else. A cloying, musty scent I couldn't pinpoint. That was the moment of revelation. The symbols, carved into the primary support timbers, etched upon the very walls, scratched even into the packed earth of the floor. Once perceived, they proliferated, an infestation of cipher, circles interwoven with lines, shapes evoking letters from no alphabet known to humankind. Hours evaporated as I stood within that cavernous space, attempting to decipher the cryptic lexicon. By the time Reese's engine murmured up the drive, twilight was bleeding across the fields, and a dull ache pulsed behind my eyes. I retreated hastily to the house, unwilling to articulate the reason for my day-long immersion in the dusty, silent barn. That night, the house was more vocal than ever. Sleep eluded me as I lay listening to what sounded undeniably like pacing back and forth in the attic space directly above. Reese slumbered beside me, blessedly unaware of the sounds fraying the edges of my sanity. Morning found me resolved to confide in Reese about the barn, the symbols. Yet, as the words formed, Cora burst into the kitchen, her face streaked with tears. "Mama, Papa," she choked out, "there's something in my room." We ascended the stairs in a sheer tremor of apprehension. Cora's room appeared untouched, pristine, until my gaze locked onto the wall above her bed. Scratched into the fresh coat of paint applied only the week before was one of the very sigils from the barn. Reese, perplexed, questioned Cora gently, suggesting she might have made the mark herself. But I knew, with chilling certainty, I knew this was merely the overture. In the ensuing weeks, the phenomena intensified. The symbols began to manifest throughout the house, discovered beneath rugs, lurking behind picture frames, even appearing gouged into the flesh of vegetables harvested from our garden. The noises amplified, becoming audible to all of us. Whispers that slithered through the walls, distinct footsteps traversing empty chambers, and sometimes, deep in the night, a sound like rhythmic chanting drifting from the direction of the barn. Finn developed a disturbing habit of sleepwalking, a behavior entirely new to him. We would find him curled in shadowed corners or standing transfixed before blank walls, uttering fragments of words in an unintelligible cadence. Cora grew increasingly insular, dedicating hours to replicating the symbols in her sketchbook, her small face etched with concentration. Reese desperately sought mundane explanations. He summoned pest control for the noises, consulted electricians regarding the cold anomalies, even engaged a child psychologist for the children. Yet, beneath his determined rationalizations, I sensed a dawning awareness mirroring my own. We were confronting something that defied conventional understanding. The culmination arrived on a tempestuous October night. Wind howled a mournful dirge around the eaves, rain flaying the window panes. We huddled in the living room, attempting distraction with a board game when, simultaneously, every light in the house extinguished. Plunged into abrupt, suffocating darkness, I heard Cora's whimper, Finn's startled cry. Reese fumbled for his mobile phone, its screen casting a feeble, inadequate glow. "It's all right," he asserted, his voice taut with manufactured calm. "Likely just a tripped breaker. I'll check the cellar." The instant he departed, the whispering commenced. It was ubiquitous, issuing from the walls, the floorboards, seemingly materializing from the very air, syllables in a tongue I didn't recognize, but which saturated me with primal dread. Cora shrieked, her finger stabbing towards the window. There, starkly illuminated by a jagged fork of lightning, stood a figure, impossibly tall and gaunt, its limbs possessing an unnatural length. It was observing us, and though its features remained obscured, I perceived with horrifying clarity that it was smiling. In that instant, a threshold within me fractured. I seized the children, propelling us out into the storm, oblivious to the lashing rain and biting wind. We scrambled into the car. I wrenched the vehicle into reverse, peeling out of the driveway, my hands trembling uncontrollably on the wheel. Reese emerged from the house, shouting our names into the gale. But I didn't falter. I couldn't. The sole imperative was escape. Distance from that house, from the malevolence that had taken root within its walls. We drove through the night, the children huddled and weeping in the back seat. I possessed no destination, only the desperate vector of away. Not until the first pale fingers of dawn stroked the horizon did I finally guide the car into a rest stop, my entire frame vibrating with exhaustion and the lingering tremors of adrenaline. As I sat there, grappling with the enormity of our situation, my phone emitted a low buzz. A text message from Reese. "Where are you? Are you okay? Please come home. We need to talk about this." I stared at the screen, tears blurring the words. A fragment of me yearned to turn back, to confront the entity haunting our home alongside him. But a larger, more primal part, the part that had witnessed the figure at the window, heard those unearthly susurrations, knew that return was impossible. I composed the reply. "We're safe. I'm sorry, Reese, but we can't come home. Not now. Maybe not ever. I'll explain. I love you." Then I silenced the phone, reignited the engine, and merged back onto the highway. Our destination remained unknown, our future uncertain. What I understood with chilling finality was that we were fleeing more than just a structure of wood and plaster. We were abandoning a darkness that had nearly engulfed us, a riddle whose solution I increasingly feared. As we sped onward, the sun ascending, my reflection flickered in the rearview mirror. There, nestled just below my jawline, was a minuscule mark, a symbol identical to those in the barn. Ice water sluiced through my veins as the realization struck. Whatever presence we had disturbed in that aged farmhouse, it was not confined by physical boundaries. It had imprinted itself upon us, claimed us in some arcane manner I could not fathom. My foot pressed harder on the accelerator, the passing landscape dissolving into streaks of color. We were running, undeniably, yet a profound sense of futility settled upon me. One cannot outrun that which has already infiltrated the self. Whatever trials await, wherever this flight concludes, one truth remains immutable. Our lives are irrevocably altered. The fresh beginning we had so desperately sought had warped into something tenebrous and distorted. Now, all that remained was to confront the unfolding consequences together. The old farmhouse stands vacant now, I presume. Yet sometimes it surfaces in my dreams, and in those nocturnal visions, I perceive its true state, not empty, but waiting. Waiting for the next souls seeking their own new dawn. And I am left to wonder, will they perceive the sigils? Will they discern the whispers? Or will they, like us, apprehend the truth only when it is far too late?